So I'm Marianne Morgan. I'm a family doc in Kelowna, and this is Jessica Barker. She's a, what's your title? Clinical Operations Manager, and she's worked many places in the Central Okanagan. I'd like to acknowledge all the amazing talks today. We're going to circle back to the team well-being portion of things. So we start a little bit with that this morning with CMPA, and then whole variety of different concepts woven through the day: psychological safety, moral injury, meaning and purpose. We already heard about palliative care. That's where we started. I loved Cecile's cycle of suffering that she showed. Very cool. So how many of you work in teams that feel dysfunctional in some way? I think all of us can probably answer that one. And do you feel safe to speak up there? Does your team have effective, transparent communication? And how many of you have come to some of these talks and heard great ideas about how to improve your team morale and team culture, but really haven't found a practical way to try them out? This way? Thank you. So that's what Jessica and I have been working on the last several years. We started looking at compassion fatigue and burnout in our palliative care teams and sort of cycled through and ended up looking at team well-being. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We've created this team well-being matrix, and along with it, a guide for leaders. If you're in the room, there should be a colorful handout on that matrix, and if you're online, hopefully there's a link in the chat that you can have a look at that, and we've got a QR code coming up here. Okay, we have nothing to disclose. And it's tough when you're working short-staffed with too many patients to care for to look up and around at your teammates and care for each other. And I think we've heard a lot about that already today. This quote from Don Berwick at the Institute for Health Improvement seems obvious, but in healthcare, we often don't look after our teams very well. And is everybody here familiar with the term joy in work? There's been a lot of physician promotion for joy in work courses through the IHI. So the IHI white paper acknowledges that leaders often have trouble figuring out how to create joy and well-being in their teams. And this image shows 4 key steps that leaders can take. The first step is asking what matters to you questions to the individuals in your team. And the second step is figuring out what gets in the way of your workforce well-being in your own team. And at IHI, they use the term pebbles and boulders, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Pebbles are issues a team can change and embark on their own, and boulders are things you identify that you go, oh, we need some help with this, and you move it up the line. The third step is to have folks like SET in our health authority and other levels of the health authority to support this work. And then that fourth step is starting, based on what you've learned from all of those things, making small and meaningful changes to try and improve things in your team, using a quality improvement approach. And that data and measurement, even if it's super simple, can show your teams how much you're making a change and improving things, and also you can use that with your systems teams. And we know up in the top corner there that all of the research shows that you get improved patient experience and provider experience with improving teams. In our experience, the toughest part of this work is those starter questions, what matters to you, and that's often where people go, yeah, I'm not comfortable, I don't know how to do this. So that IHI white paper has tons of ways to start on that, and then we've got some practical ideas as well. But once you start asking them, it gets easier. So generally what people start is like, oh, wow, nobody's ever asked me that. Thanks, that's great. And then what you get is those boulders. It's like, well, I can't take my vacation when I want, and there's level loading and all of the things that you really need help from your senior leadership folks. But what we experienced is if you start taking those things to senior leadership and you start building some trust, then people start bringing out the pebbles. So things like people feeling like they're working out of scope, too many emails, the need for in-the-moment debriefs after traumatic deaths for our palliative teams would be a specific example. And we really found that it was important to include all team members in this. So We're mostly a group of physicians here. We especially came together today to talk about our dyad partnership, but also that you talk from the cleaners to your clinical care teams, that everybody gets involved if you really want to make change in your organization. I'm going to miss my page. Did you have one before that? Perfect.
Here we go.
Good. So we had a talk this morning for the CMPA, so I won't talk much about this one, but this slide comes from the fetal health surveillance course that all obstetrics providers need to take now. And initially it was just about reading fetal heart tracings and making sure we were all doing the same thing. And then over time, as our medical legal folks, experts have said, actually it makes a difference if you talk to each other. Team communication now is a huge piece of this update that you need to do every couple of years. So this is where I've seen personally where joy in work and well-being is starting to come together. Okay, so who do you need to get going on this work? And this is where we want to talk a little bit about working in a team, because a lot of this kind of work, and we've heard about it through the day, is it really quality improvement work when you're talking about how you feel with each other and how you communicate? Can you measure that? And the answer is yes to all of those things, but it can be tough to convince people that this is worthy of your time. So definitely find like-minded folks if you're starting to do this, and hopefully clinical and operations people. So I think there's a fair number of clinical people in the room. How many admin and operations? Recognizing a lot of you are both. Yeah. It's huge to get a multitude of folks, so not just your clinical team. If you can engage your operations, you'll be way ahead of the game. And I would say too, over the years, because this can be challenging work, when one of us goes, yeah, I'm done with this, we didn't get where we needed to be, and then the other will go, oh, no, let's just hang on, we can do something here, and we've kind of pulled each other along. So we haven't worked in the same environment for several years now, but we keep coming back together for this team well-being stuff and trying to improve our talks and what we've got. So yeah, it's a good relationship. So we joined PQI's first cohort that had team dyads in 2018 or 2019, and started with this compassion fatigue burnout stuff with our staff, made all kinds of errors, totally screwed up, went all kinds of directions, and ended up on this, if you ask your teams what they need and start supporting them, things go much better. And so that's the direction we ended up going in. With that whole co-creation and our PQI project, we ended up decreasing sick time by 50% in that year, which caught IH's attention and then SSC's attention. And so then we got asked to be a scale and spread project. But the idea with that was you were just supposed to hand your toolkit over to another site and then they could recreate it, reproduce it. And we went, oh, well, what did we do? So it took us quite a while. It took us years where lots of other sites could say, well, this is how you do, and change your stroke times or your door to whatever TPA times. And it took us a while. So while we were researching, there was lots of stuff on how to talk to front lines, lots of things about how to engage your systems, but not very much about how to talk to teams and how to work with your team. So hence the team wellbeing matrix that you have in front of you. And so we created this team wellbeing matrix and we built a guide for leaders around it. This QR code is here. That takes you somewhere on our IHA site and have a look. I was having trouble with the Wi-Fi in here getting it to totally download, so you might not be able to look at the whole thing. Dima asked us today to speak with the understanding that many teams are experiencing rapid change, including the hiring of new physicians and ongoing transitions. And we know, as we've talked about today too, that this is a complex and demanding time in healthcare. So we're trying to offer you some practical ideas to help you engage your teams, check in on how they're doing, and intentionally work to the kind of resilient, healthy teams that we all want to be a part of. I'm going to hand you over to Jessica.
Okay, so for those in the room, you've got a copy of the Team Wellbeing Matrix in front of you, so feel free to grab it. For those online, there is a link to it, to the matrix itself, and then the guide for leaders. So just going to introduce it to you. In our research, like Marianne said, we really found that there wasn't a tool to measure joy and team well-being. So we decided to just create one. So like Marianne said, it's really a measurement and an engagement tool. And it's based on a model that really helps to track team growth, really allows teams to find themselves, see their progress. And there's 5 pillars. So the left pillar really shows a team that's unaware or kind of struggling. The middle pillar, as we move to the right, shows a team that is starting to feel safe. Team members are starting to take ownership. And then that right pillar, that far right pillar really shows a team that everybody wants to work on. And then within the pillars, there are signposts, is what we're calling it. So at the top, it really starts with that self-awareness. So this is how individuals really see themselves within a team. Then we move into the team dynamics. So that's how the team functions and feels overall. And then we've included the patient perspective as well. So this is the patient's perspective to team joy and well-being. And then finally, we've got the quality improvement side of it. So the joy journey at the bottom really reflects the team's path in improving quality. So it is all about the team, we say. So the matrix is flexible. You can bring it to a team huddle to spark a conversation, and really depending on the psychological safety of that team too, it actually might be more appropriate to begin with an anonymous survey. So it is really a flexible approach to this. There's no single right way, and the important thing that we have learned is it's really about meeting the teams where they're at. And then going into the pillars themselves. So each pillar has its own page within our guide for leaders. And within the guide for leaders, that pillar has a team vibe. So this is how, it's really a snapshot of what it feels like to work within this team. There's coaching tips. So that's really simple ways where you can support and guide the team. And then we've also got practical change ideas too embedded within our guide. And really is helping you to build connection and engagement with your team within that pillar. And the ideas really come from all over. So within our own research, we've done environmental scans. We've had lots of conversations with teams over the years. We've looked at High's Joy and Work white paper, like Marianne mentioned, and then quality leaders like Helen Bevan, Amar Shah. And today I'm going to dive into 3 of the 5 pillars, and we're just going to offer some ideas from teams who've actually tried out some of this work. So looking at this slide, this is the unaware pillar. So this is a team that feels really stuck. People are disconnected, really hesitant to step up. Here we're saying it's really important to consider psychological safety. So if your team is in this pillar, do not be discouraged. You can just start small. Start with small conversations to get the ball rolling. And in these early pillars, we have found that it usually takes some leader-driven effort to get that ball rolling, but it's doable. So I just want to share an example from my own team, actually. So earlier this year, I shifted portfolios and I manage a couple of the urgent and primary care centers in the central Okanagan. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the UPCCs, they provide care for urgent health concerns within 24 hours that don't require emergency department resources. And many of the UPCCs also offer ongoing longitudinal care too. It's team-based, whole person care, and we've got nurses, physicians, nurse practitioners, social workers, physios, MOAs, we've got a whole team. One of the first things I did when I came into those teams was to use the team wellbeing matrix to really get a quick temperature check of where my teams were at. So I actually started first by asking the patient care coordinators where they felt our teams were sitting on the matrix. So that gave me kind of immediate insight to where the team was at and how best to actually start engaging with the teams. I'm just going to focus on the West Kelowna Urgent and Primary Care Center, and that's in the photo that you can see on the screen. So using the team wellbeing matrix, it became pretty clear to me that the West Kelowna team was primarily in the unaware or explore pillars. So I just want to share a really practical tool that I use to start some meaningful conversations with those teams and really start that engagement. So I don't know if anybody has ever heard of this tool. It's called the Good Day, Bad Day tool. So it really helps teams or individuals clearly describe what a good day at work looks like for them or what a not so day at work looks like for them. So those days that are really challenging or frustrating. So I have found it, and we have found that it really helps to create this shared understanding by really focusing on the everyday experiences of teams instead of them getting caught up in like these abstract goals or these big initiatives that they don't feel a part of. So Marianne and I have used this tool with several teams. And over the course of 1 month at the West Kelowna Urgent and Primary Care Center, we used these simple paper chits. And they've got a basic scale from 0 to 10. So staff at the end of their shift every day would score how their shift was on that scale of 0 to 10. And then they could also write comments if they wanted to of what made their day good and what made their day not so good. So like the little quality improvement nerd that I am, I had to make a run chart, of course. So here's some of the data from that month. And so the West Kelowna UPCC team's average score over that month was a 7 out of 10, which actually surprised me and surprised the other leaders as well. And you can see that a lot of the scores are above 7, which is really encouraging. It tells us that we've got people who are having positive days. But at the same time, in the data, you can see that there's a number of scores that fall below 7. And what's interesting when I looked at it further is a lot of those lower scores fall on the same days. So that was telling me that we had multiple team members experiencing more challenging days at the same time, which leads me to, ask what's going on. So what I did from that was really look at the comments. So I actually themed out the comments that came forward too in those chits. And I looked at what made it a good day for people. And this is a little word cloud that I put together just as I did all of those comments. So I could see lots of teamwork, positive, we're a family, workload, flow, communication, collaboration were really common themes. And on the days that were rated as good, the West Kelowna team consistently highlighted a few key factors. So days went best when provider coverage and RN staffing allowed for smoother patient flow and higher quality of care. So not surprising, we all like that too. Strong teamwork and collaboration played a really big role in what made their day good. And when we had balanced workloads, patient flow was really manageable and patient interactions were positive, their staff were more likely to report that their day was good or better. And then we went to what made it a not so good day. So I did the same thing with a word cloud there. And we presented this back to our staff too, and this was hard. It's hard to see some of these words out there visually. So we see understaffed, hard day, acuity, distress, moral distress. We see words like nasty, patience, demeaning, grumpy, rude. So it's hard to look at some of those words, but that is truly what was coming up from the staff. So when we looked at what made it for a tougher day, more themes came up, again, just like we saw on the good day. So staffing shortages and provider coverage gaps was the most common challenge. So when we're short-staffed, it feels heavy for everybody. And some days we're also impacted by difficult patient interactions or behaviors, which can really take an emotional toll on the team. And finally, we had safety and security concerns were highlighted. And those moments were really coming across as impacting the team. So what do we do with all of that? What did it tell us? So hearing directly from the team, especially for me as a leader, as a new leader coming into this team, has been incredibly valuable and really has allowed for me and the leaders on that team to really plan for kind of meaningful and actionable changes. And another important piece in when we do this good day, bad day kind of exercise and this work is about acknowledging. So staff are starting to feel heard and the moral distress is being named and validated. And as a team, what are we doing now? Well, we're starting to work on these pebbles that came forward. So addressing some of these issues that are within our span of control, like workload, We're looking at recruitment of providers and recruiting more RNs to help with some of that, offset some of that workload. The safety and security issues that were identified were escalated all the way up to our senior leadership tables. So for me, I've gotten actually some real traction and tangible changes in place in only a few short months in really addressing like workplace violence in our UPCCs. And so really with this trust building, acknowledging their concerns, and actually seeing some action coming out from the feedback that they're providing, I feel like, and the team is saying, that we are starting to move to that next pillar. So that's the no pillar. So that's that green one in the middle. So this is when teams are starting to become more engaged, more supportive, and more open to each other's perspectives. So a simple but powerful idea from one of our palliative team. So they have adjusted their end of day check-in with just 2 questions. And the first question that they always ask, and they still now to this day still ask this question almost 6-7 years later, is what went well today? So they reframed it and started by opening what went well today, and then they go next into the what could have gone better and what could we do differently. So they connect every single day and start with what went well. And we really found that that has shifted the focus away from venting and really more towards that reflection and learning. And it helps to set the stage for those what matters to you conversations that Marianne referred to. And it starts to create space for conversations about what are the pebbles, what are those small things that we can start working on as a team, and what are the boulders, what are the things that we, myself as the leader, need to bring forward and ask for more support with. And really, most importantly, what can we co-create together? Like, what solutions as a team can we co-create together? So at the far right is the resilient pillar. So this is what we're working towards. I mean, with my UPCC teams, this is where I would like to be at. And we've all known teams like this. If this is your team, people are probably asking you, like, what is your secret sauce? I want to be part of that team. At this stage, we see that the teams are really thriving on that trust, shared decision-making, that shared accountability and ownership. And here we find that change isn't solely driven by the leaders. This is very much, we see team members stepping up, wanting to lead alongside you. And this is such an incredibly rewarding and energizing team to lead. And one change idea that we've got in our guide for leaders in this pillar would be Schwartz rounds. And I don't know if anybody has ever heard of that. Schwartz rounds really are kind of rounds, but it's more a structured, safe space where staff can come together and actually share about the emotional challenges of their work. And really takes a lot of psychological safety to be able to run those Schwartz rounds. But have a Google on those, are very interesting. And we also just want to acknowledge that this final pillar, it might look different for different teams, and that's okay. Our guide actually has a blank version of the team wellbeing matrix, so you could create your own resilient pillar with your team. In fact, you can create your whole 5 pillars with your team. It's whatever it looks like for you. And it's really important to remember that teams don't always move through the pillar in order. So we know team growth isn't linear. It's more like a game of snakes and ladders. Like, you might move up the pillars and then you might do a couple steps back. And we know we've got internal factors like staff turnover happens all the time. External factors like restructuring or budget cuts in our current kind of financial climate. And that's why our Guide for Leaders actually does have some advice just about these detours and these roadblocks too. So now that you've kind of heard about the team wellbeing matrix, we'll just maybe get you to take a moment, think about it. You can either reflect on your own, you can have a conversation with your neighbor, and just think about one thing you can do to improve team joy and well-being with your team.
Getting fuzzy all yeah. Dima just gave us the 5 minutes, so that's all you get for having a look, but pull it out again and share it with your teams. So we'd like to finish with talking about the why behind the work. And I think, again, we've heard about that all day long today in different ways. The this quote really continues to inspire us. So in that very first project we did with our palliative teams, after some of those initial conversations, one of our palliative nurses who was really burned out and planning to quit wrote us this email, and this was a portion of it. I'll let you read through. And what's really wonderful is she's still working today, and that was, what, 7 years ago. So when we started this work, there was a lot of skepticism. I think I mentioned earlier that team well-being could be quality improvement work, and we're starting to see a real shift in attitudes there. And really happy now to see full days that are committed to wellness and the whole spectrum. I think it's bigger than wellness. I know that's the title of the day, but it's really everything we are. And somebody had that great picture of it's all around, you're part of the system. Because instead of us being the random wellness speaker on the docket for the day, it's really nice just to be part of something you can refer to all of the talks through the day. Okay, so in summary, if you're looking to improve well-being of the individuals in your team, find some friends and champions, try using our matrix and guide for leaders, encourage psychological safety, be curious and vulnerable and accept criticism, and trust your teams to lead. And as we keep saying, at the core of this, it's all about our people and our teams. Our contact details are on this slide. Reach out anytime. We are hoping to make this more of a dynamic document. So if you have great ideas that you've come up with, please share. We'd love to hear about them. And if you need more information from us, we would love to hear about it anytime. Thanks.